So now we would start with filling up our button action. So for that purpose, we are going to create an instance of the article class. Article class is basically that entity we created while inside our data model. So using our managed object context that I told you about, we are going to copy all the values from our form and then save that managed object context. So essentially this is what this code would be doing. So for each specific value, we just created a constant here, as you can see, and we are essentially copying the same thing from the application to our database, you can say, right? Database, I mean by that code data, the saved context. So for that purpose, we are doing this. And at the end of these three lines, we would add that save function, which is a predefined function, by the way. So this is how essentially you save something. And obviously we are putting it inside the buttons action. That's a really major reason. Obviously when the button would be tapped, this function would trigger and it would save the things. So this completes the form for now, showing that add article view involves returning to our main view as well. The main view is content view, as you know. So we should show the add article view in some way, right? So for that purpose, we are going to use sheets. So we need to track obviously the boolean for which if the sheet is showing is true or false. For that purpose, we are going to use a state property. And obviously we would toggle that whenever we click in certain some area. So for content view, we would be adding a button as well. So from content view, we need to add a managed object context property to it as well. Since I told you wherever there's a need for that, we have to do it. And we would need to add one more important thing, that is fetch request. So retrieving information from core data is done using a fetch request. We describe what we want and how it should be sorted. For our example, I'm not adding any sorting functionality for now, but we would come back to it later on. So whether there should be any filters or not, and this is what essentially we give out inside the fetch request. And obviously I said we would come back to the code and change this functionality of sorting. So this is as the property wrapper, you can say. It's called fetch request and it takes in two parameters: the entity we want to query and how we want the results to be sorted. So now that we have created our state property, we would be going inside the body of our content view. Content view is essentially the view that would show up when our app launches, right? So we will use a navigation view inside the body. So let's just get going with it. Let's just delete the already present code and now let's add this. And we had to add a navigation bar item as well, which would be showing at the top right of our screen, and that is what which would trigger the state property. So for now let's just add a simple text, but we would eventually change it as well, right? So now we are just writing the count for how many articles are present inside our view. So this is fairly simple code, and once we are done with it, we can just add the navigation bar title. So we'll be using news app for this. And now we can add navigation bar item, and that would be trailing. That means it would be at the rightmost part. At once you can use either trailing or leading or both too, but they should be inside the same parenthesis. That's a simple requirement. So this is just a simple code for the button action that we would be using inside our bar item, I mean. Obviously it would toggle the value of this boolean. And what should it look like? It should obviously look like some image or icon we should use here. So for that purpose I'm going to use a plus sign, which would act as the button. And once we are done with this much, we should add the content, like what should be inside of the sheet. So for that we are going to use add article view itself, and since we have given it a value, as you remember, we would need to add that alongside as well. So we are writing dot environment. Remember how we use environment object? If I haven't told you, whenever you need to like share an environment object in between different views, you use it as, like, you write it as period and that environment object name enclose inside the environment property wrapper alongside the view when you need to show it inside the body of some other view. This is specific to environment objects only. So now that we are done with this much, our content view is ready to show that the count of those articles. I think we should add a simple functionality to add article view as well, which would be to dismiss itself whenever the user is done adding the article, right? So for that we would need to change files and go there and do that. And it's a fairly simple functionality actually. Now let's go back to adding that dismissing functionality inside our add article view. So for that purpose we are going to add obviously an environment property, which would be about presentation mode. And then we would need to add just a simple line like dot wrapped value dot dismiss. That would be at the end of our button. So like whenever the button goes on about saving the thing, and at the very last line before adding, like just after saving, it would dismiss itself. It would go back then. And that's a really common thing you see in most of the applications. Like these small things matter. They provide a good user experience. So that's what essentially we are doing here. And there you go, you're almost done with it. So now that we have created this much code, let's just check our application. So there you can see I just clicked on that bar button item, and now I'm adding some content into it so that we can just check like how does it look like. So it's asking me to select a genre as well. When you just click on save, and now it shows count as 1. So you know that it perfectly works. And obviously this is permanent memory, so it won't go away even if you relaunch your application. Now let's move on to the later topic.